So good morning. My name is Jaime Molera. I work with the Western Way. It's an organization that's been working in the West and working in Arizona to develop common sense approaches on environmental policy. We're very proud to be joining the Conservation Coalition and the Conservative Energy Network in sponsoring this event today, in looking at some of the opinions that have been formulated. And one of the things that I think policymakers need to understand about why this is so important. You know, we're involved in a number of issues in Arizona, and when you have a vacuum of policy, particularly good policy, like we're wanting to do on environmental issues, unfortunately, bad things happen. In Arizona, we're seeing a really bad initiative taking place on education policy. And I'm not going to get into it because I'm the chairman of that no campaign, but Prop 208 is a horrible thing. So anybody out there that is thinking about voting on that, but that's the issue, is that when you have bad policy or you have a vacuum of policy, bad policies happen. And so we're very pleased today to have this presentation. Kick it off by introducing Mark Pischea. Mark's a 35-year veteran of Republican politics and political strategy. He served as the deputy director of the NRCC, and I bet that's a position he's glad he's not in this election cycle. But Mark, in 2016, founded the Conservative Energy Network. And the Conservative Energy Network is a network of state-based conservative organizations dedicated to expanding our nation's commitment to clean energy through adherence of conservative principles: free markets and competition, less government, states' rights, greater personal freedom. It launched with 7 state members and now has on the ground in 21 states that are focused on improving states' energy policies. As a national leader, the CEN is helping to change the politics of clean energy, demonstrating that conservatives can provide meaningful contributions to policy without compromising their ideals. And so, Mark, it's an honor to meet with you today and have you kick this off.
I mean, thank you very much, and thank you for the outstanding work that you are doing and the Western Way is doing in Arizona. Thank you for that introduction. As Jaime said, I'm Mark Pischea. I'm the president and CEO of CEN, and we are conservatives working in state capitals to favorably impact energy policy, but from a conservative perspective. We rely a lot on public opinion polling to help guide our strategy and to inform our energy education work. And so we're pleased to offer this survey in Arizona, which is an oversampling of a national survey we released last week of voter attitudes towards energy nationwide. We looked at 4 what we consider to be key states, battleground states, which are also largely acknowledged by the media. So we oversampled in Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Georgia to take a closer look at what folks are thinking when it comes to energy and the impact of that on the upcoming election. So we work with public opinion strategies. POS is a top, if not the top, Republican pollster in the nation. Glen Bolger, who is a co-founder of POS and continues to be a principal, has done our survey work for the last 5 years now, and they performed this research as well. So I'd like to introduce Glen, and thank you all for attending, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have following Glen's presentation. So with that,
and if I may, Mark, just I was remiss in not saying, if there's any questions, please go to the Q&A feature on the Zoom, ask your questions, and I'll be happy to moderate that conversation. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, I'll take it from here. Thanks, Jaime and Mark, for the introductory remarks. As Mark said, we did the survey. It was oversample. So we did a total of 321 interviews online. Survey was done October 5th through the 12th. So still relatively fresh data, especially on public policy such as energy policy. Looking at issues, look, clean energy is not at the top of the agenda for voters in Arizona, but that doesn't mean that there are not elements of it that are very important, and that it's not something that conservative candidates can run on. On domestic energy production, we asked, as a country, the US should put more emphasis, less emphasis, or about the same emphasis as it does now. More emphasis is in blue, less emphasis in red. Green is about the same. As you can see, wind, solar, and hydro all score well in Arizona. Many say, over 60% or more on all three of them say that there should be more emphasis. Less emphasis is relatively low, 13% for wind, 10 for solar, 8 for hydropower. You contrast that with coal, for instance, which is 4-to-1 less emphasis over more emphasis. Natural gas is nearly 2-to-1 more over less. And nuclear power, as we find in most places in the country, is voters are relatively evenly divided on more or less on that. Biomass and clean coal, their numbers are kind of mixed. You can see 55% say same for biomass. My theory on that is because you see that kind of number both in the national survey and in the oversamples. My theory is that a lot of voters don't know what biomass is, so they're kind of reluctant to take a position saying, yeah, we need more or less of that. And then clean coal, the emphasis on, or the word coal carries a little more weight in Arizona than the word clean. Looking at Republicans, coal is a negative by 2-to-1, natural gas, 45 more, 7 less. So Republicans are big supporters of natural gas. Wind, 47-22. Solar has the highest at 55 more emphasis. The less emphasis you can see is 15%. Nuclear power among Republicans is 2-to-1, and then hydropower does very well, 52. In fact, it's the best of the 6 options that we tested. Here, we didn't include clean coal and biomass just because the numbers on that were fairly mixed at best. And then among independents, you see coal very much a negative, natural gas 2-to-1 positive, wind better than 3-to-1, solar power very significant, better than 5-to-1, nuclear power relatively mixed, and hydropower essentially 5-to-1 as well. So the clean energy sources are very important among independents. And one of the reasons that we're focusing on independents a lot in this survey is, look, independents cast the deciding votes in most elections. You look at years that Republicans do well, such as 1994, 2010, 2014, and independents backed a Republican by double digits. When Democrats do well, whether it's 2006, 2008, 2018, independents vote for the Democrats by double digits. In close election years, like a 2016, independents are more relatively divided. So independents, they're the ones who make the decisions. And right now, honestly, Republicans are having challenges attracting support from independents. So here, with just over a week to go, this just underscores that clean energy is an issue that would cause independents to take a look at Republican candidates who talk about it. Looking at party issue handling, look, we're behind the 8 ball on this stuff. We're down on the environment to the Democrats. We asked who would do a better job. The environment, energy, clean energy, or climate change. And as you can see, the Democrats have significant advantages. One reason is they talk about these issues. Republicans do not focus on it that often. Let's look at clean energy. Would you say you support or oppose the government taking action to accelerate the development and use of clean energy in the United States? 87% support, 13% oppose. Look at the intensity on the pie chart. 50% strongly support, only 5% strongly oppose. Just for perspective, 30% intensity is very significant. So to be all the way up at 50 shows you how strongly supported this is. And then look at it by party on the right side of the chart. Republicans, 77% support, 83% among independents, 97 among Democrats. There aren't that many issues where there's only a 20-point gap between Republicans and Democrats. And if you'll notice, obviously, independents are somewhere in the middle at 83%, a little closer to Republicans. But the point being is this is a very positive and solid issue that Republicans can use, that both the base supports and swing voters support as well. Look at it by age, support is higher among younger voters. Look, it's very high among older voters too. When you're talking about a range between 78 and 100% support by age cohort, that's all very significant. The observation being, though, the key part here is Republican candidates are having a tough time with younger voters, and this is something that would attract them. Sorry about that. I thought I had muted my phone. There we go. Then we asked a four-part question. To increase clean energy production, would you prefer approaches that allow markets and businesses to provide more clean energy production? 65%. A price or tax put on carbon emissions? 16%. Government mandates and quotas? 15%. Or taxpayer-funded subsidies all the way down to 3%. So when you look at the markets, there is a partisan difference, but Republicans very supportive of a market-oriented approach, 82%. Independents are there too, 66%. Even a significant plurality of Democrats, 48%, prefer a market-oriented approach. And this gives Republican candidates something to talk about in terms of having clean energy solutions and moving forward on clean energy. Remember, we don't have to accept the Democrats' prescriptions for clean energy. We certainly, and Mark and his organization have been a leader in this, have plenty of prescriptions of our own that are comfortable for Republican and independent voters. On nuclear energy, agree, disagree. Nuclear energy should be included and prioritized as part of the country's clean energy mix. 65% agree, 35% disagree. All three party groups agree with that statement, and all by relatively strong numbers, 59% among both independents and Democrats, Republicans 3-1 at 74-26. Moving now to climate, 7 out of 10 voters say that climate change is important to their vote. You see it's 69-31, 37% very important, only 14% not at all important. Republicans are more mixed on this, evenly divided. Independents 2-1, Democrats, obviously, not surprisingly, overwhelmingly say it's important to them. And we talked about the generation gap a little bit earlier and the challenges Republican candidates are facing with that. And here you can see that younger voters are much more likely to say that climate change is important to their vote. Then we asked a four-part on climate change. It's an extreme threat. It's a threat to be considered. It's a minor threat or not at all a threat. And as you can see, at least in the top box, 45% say it's an extreme threat, and another 27%, 73% overall, say that it's a threat to be considered. 73% are one of the top two. Then, assuming it's caused by humans, which is, do you think, the best way to deal with the issue? The leader on the individual options, putting more efforts into research, development, and innovation of clean energy sources, came in at 20%. Then we had a couple at 14%, phasing out use of fossil fuels and planting more trees. And most of the people, though, a plurality picked 42%, all of the above, which, you know, when you give people that option, a lot of them do move to that, but it's also a sign that they want to try any number of aggressive options for that. 70% say they're more likely to support a Republican candidate who embraces an innovation-based approach to addressing climate change, 70-30. You'll note that only 15% say much more likely, 16% much less likely. So there's a little bit of fuzz there for voters. But what's important is, one of the reasons for that, let me back up for a second. One of the reasons for that is innovation-based approach it's good. It sounds conservative. It sounds something Republicans can get behind, but people would still like to know a little bit more detail. So I think, this is something that candidates who run on this and talk about this would want to flesh out, but you'll notice that the people much more likely to vote for a Republican are different Republican subgroups, as well as well-educated voters, those with a graduate professional degree, for instance, women with college degrees, groups that Republicans are having some challenges with. Would your view of President Trump be more favorable or less favorable if he embraced a conservative approach to addressing clean energy and climate change by prioritizing technology, innovation, and competition? 62% more favorable, 38% less favorable. You can see, Republicans are 83% more favorable to him, 64% among independents, and even 41% against Democrats. Now, that's not to say that in this last week, if the president were to make this a central part of his messaging, he'd suddenly pick up 40% of Democrats. That's, it's not how elections work in the states. Obviously, we tend to vote for our party, but it does show that among independents, it is something that would cause them to listen to a candidate that they have, a fair degree of skepticism towards. If you look at his image numbers on national polls, for instance, among independents, then you'll note that younger men are still skeptical, but younger women are more likely to say, 57%, that they'd be more favorable. You look at the crosstabs in any survey, the president does much better with older voters, and you see that reflected here as well. On the electric grid, we asked the question, now given America's unpreparedness for the coronavirus pandemic, how important is it to you that we apply lessons learned and begin taking steps to protect our electricity grid from disaster, which experts say is just a matter of time? 93% say it's important, 57% say that it's very important. And you'll see that a lot of different groups, particularly Hispanics, minority voters overall, older voters, and men and Democrats are likely to say, yeah, it's important. But look, when you get to 93% overall total important, that means everybody thinks it's important. And by the way, the whole idea of an electricity grid disaster being just a matter of time, we're just sharing this with you to brighten your Monday, to give you something else to worry about today. Moving on now to clean energy policy proposals. We tested a number and asked whether they favor or oppose that policy. And you can see that, and by the way, you'll notice that we ranked it by the percent strongly favor. And that's again because intensity really matters. Now look, there's not that much difference between 89% support and 93% support. Anyhow, I mean, it's obviously all five of these. Sorry, I'm not good with numbers. That's a pollster joke, calm down. But all five of these are, test very, very well. I'm not gonna read each one of them to you. I've left this up for a little bit. Hopefully you've had time to look at it. And I know this will be mentioned after the fact, but this is also available on the website, which will be shared with you because I don't, in a little bit, because I don't know what the website is. We also asked how important each of these are, and this is about property owners' rights. And one is ability to protecting their ability to produce energy on their land or to lease their land for renewable energy production. You'll notice both score 89%. Produce energy on their land at 46%. Very important, is 10 points higher. But overall, Arizona voters get to the same place on this. Turning now to message testing, we asked two different questions, and these are called some people, other people questions, where we give two different options, messages, pro and con, or one perspective versus the other, and ask which they prefer. And this is on again, purchasing electricity. And you'll note that both questions are overwhelmingly in favor of a new system that gives people more of a choice and what kind, including clean energy in the one. That works out 89-11, and then basically 3-to-1 on a new electricity system, benefits the environment, new technology, more choices. And again, consumers like that, obviously, not surprisingly. No matter how you look at it, choice is always tests very strong. So with that, I'll turn it back over to our hosts to moderate questions. I'll mute my mic and only jump in if there's survey related questions, but if there's policy stuff, you're not going to hear me jump in on those.
Glenn, can I just throw this out or ask you this as climate change is becoming more and more of an issue, and as we've seen over the years, it's continuing to get more coverage. I would imagine you would see these poll numbers go up, right? I mean, I would imagine across the board, Republicans, Independents, Democrats, you're going to see people that are going to want to have some kind of significant solutions over time.
Yes, I think that's right. We're seeing that. Sorry about that. There we go. Back to the front in case something on the survey comes up. Yes, we have seen increase. Look, Democrats are already there. They feel pretty strongly about that. Independents also are quite concerned about climate change. And now we're starting to see increases among Republicans as well. And I think that one of the reasons we're seeing that increase this year compared, and again, we haven't tested these specifically in Arizona just as part of a national survey before. This is the first Arizona specific survey that we've done for CEN and the Conservation Coalition. But I think one of the reasons is we are seeing more instances of extreme weather, for example. Whether it's floods, heat, whatever, hurricanes.
Right. Mark, what states, in your opinion, do a better job of this? I mean, Glenn has given us a kind of good picture nationally of where Republicans, what they're thinking and what we should be doing. But who would you say would be a kind of a good model of a state, or hopefully a couple of states, that we can say they're starting to do this and they're starting to take this seriously and really starting to understand how you can provide these kinds of market-based solutions?
Good question. Texas is the gold standard, and I'm not saying that just because it's Texas and everything's bigger, but Texas, is the closest we have to an open market right now. In fact, I love to compare Texas and California, two large states, two states that approached their development to an all of the above approach to energy differently. Texas did it through free markets. California did it through extensive mandates and subsidies and growing the size of government. And today, Texas has actually more renewable resources than California, and did it for a whole lot less money. So, Texas is the standard. But, we think that, when it comes to finding common ground on energy, and, even though we are conservatives and, even though we are fiercely partisan, many of us in our personal beliefs, we also acknowledge that if we're going to have enduring policy, it's going to have to be bipartisan. And if bipartisan solutions are going to happen, it's not going to be along the California lines. It's going to be along the Texas lines. And so more markets, less government, state sovereignty, local sovereignty are the policy constructs that we prefer and that are popular all over the country, not just in Arizona.
And just to follow up with that, one of the things we're seeing in Arizona is that when there is a dearth of good policy proposals and even candidates really that are wanting to move this agenda forward, I mean, you have a backlash. We have a corporation commission that sets the utility rates, for instance, and it appears as though there's just been a massive increase of more progressive thought, and there's really no Republican solutions. Do you see that as well? When there's a dearth of good proposals, you're going to get the opposite. You're going to get more Green New Deal types of solutions.
Yeah, I think that's always the case, and I think that's a good point. I think what also we're also seeing happening is that if you're an incumbent investor-owned utility, a monopoly utility, your only goal is to stay in business. And competition, free markets, Republican activism is a threat to that monopoly status. And so quite often we're seeing utilities make sweetheart deals with environmentalists because they fear environmental regulation much less than they fear wholesale competition and retail competition. So I think that's a dynamic we're seeing play out in Arizona as well, where APS is looking to hold on to their place in the energy landscape.
So maybe this question is for both you and Glenn, but if Republicans don't do a better job, as this poll indicates, of coming up with more reasonable solutions, do we see a trend of Democrats being able to hit Republicans and Republicans not being able to? I mean, we're seeing in this election cycle, certainly, but do you think that that will continue over time if we don't start to think about this more seriously?
I'll jump in there and let Glenn weigh in, but absolutely. This is our 5th year of national polling, and we're seeing that among all voters, acceptance for the inevitable transition to clean energy is pretty much unanimous. And where there's disagreement, though, is on the kinds of policies that are important to get us there. And Republicans who do not have an answer to those questions and a solution to bring to the table do that at their own peril with respect to the electorate.
I would concur with Mark. I would also add that what voters, particularly Republicans, are not looking for is for government to choose winners or losers. And I think you saw that reflected in the data where you saw out of those 4 different options, 65% preferred market solutions. And and I think Mark and his organization have been a leader in coming up with ideas that policy ideas that work in states to smooth the pathway without picking winners and losers, make it easier to for clean energy to thrive as a whole, as opposed to Solyndra, which still gets mentioned in my focus groups when people talk about concerns they have with that. So it's what are the broad policies as opposed to how do we specifically decide that this company is going to thrive and give them all sorts of subsidies, for instance.
I would also add that this is not a zero-sum game. If you watch the presidential debates, you would think that your options are Green New Deal or energy independence. And there are myriad policy options in between. There are shades of gray here that are available to Republican policymakers to move us closer to policy that reflects Republican principles. This isn't either or. And only by engaging, only by jumping into the fray, will Republicans find their place in this debate from a policy perspective and start to offer solutions. The biggest disadvantage we have as conservatives is that we are, as Jaime pointed out earlier, late to the game here. And we need to begin to assert ourselves in this space if we're going to see the kinds of positive changes that as conservatives we want to see.
So Mark, I guess as a final question, I know we're thankfully ending this election cycle, but election cycles are perpetual, it seems like nowadays. As we move into a gubernatorial race in Arizona, what would you suggest as some of the things that candidates for maybe the governor's office might want to start thinking about and looking at, and some models of what they can be doing in this area that could be of benefit?
Well, we've had some tremendous leadership from Republican governors across the country. In fact, if you look right now at where most of the renewable development is happening in red states and in red congressional districts, not in blue states. And, you know, if I was to, and like I said, there are so many tremendous Republican governors out there. But I think if we look in Iowa, you know, there's tremendous leadership happening there. And in Utah and a number of Western states. But I think the important piece is, number one, own it as an important issue that you have to have a position on and weigh in on. And secondly, you can do this by embracing policies that make sense to your base and won't compromise your position with them, while at the same time improving your status on with independent voters. And you know, policy opportunities will come. I mean, that's a state by state perspective, but it's important that Republicans at a minimum be able to language the issue and demonstrate empathy for it and for people who believe strongly in its importance. I think the distinction that we make as conservatives is largely around urgency. And that's where you get into the climate debate. And CEN, while we embrace data and all data is helpful, formally we are agnostic on climate because it's important to us that we move the needle on clean energy, and climate can be a distraction in that argument. But you know, climate also is becoming more and more politically mainstream, and Republicans are going to have to reassess their position there as candidates. But I think also, to your point, Jaime, after this election, there's a good chance the Republican Party is going to have to do some rebranding, and clean energy will be at the cornerstone of that work and helping to shape perceptions of the party going forward in 2020 and beyond.
Well, I just wanted to wrap up by saying thank you so much. I want to thank Glen Bolger for his tremendous work. Public opinion strategies has, as we know, been a leader in public polling across the country. Mark Pischea, your work with the Conservative Energy Network, the Conservation Coalition, and the Western Way are trying to do all these things of coming up with reasonable and needed environmental policies, because it's something that we all know that's it's real and we have to be engaged in it, but it also has to be done in a way that helps Americans in my state, Arizonans, grow our economy and be able to make sure that Arizonans have a good quality of life. This presentation is going to be shared, just so you know, with various business organizations across the state, as well as all candidates and elected officials. So we appreciate this information. It's going to continue to get disseminated, and we're going to make sure that more and more individuals understand how important this is. So on behalf of, again, the Conservative Energy Network, the Conservation Coalition, and the Western Way, I want to thank you all for your presentation, and really do appreciate all the work that's been done and what you're continuing to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.